Okay, hi. It's Monday, October 3rd. It's actually turned into a nice day here in the Northeast. It's been kind of cold and overcast the last week or so, so thought I'd do the video outside in my backyard today. Um, okay, quick recap of week 5 and then a little introduction to week 6, reaching to get my notes. Um, let's see. In week 5, we basically looked at cash management, and there were some formulas we learned that we looked at in our 2 discussion forums that help us figure out how best to use um, our financial resources to sort of like maximize the return on it so that you can use money to, quote, make money. Um, Right, the first example of that was taking out a loan in order to pay off a bill early and get an early payment reduction in the price. And the question is, what was it worth taking out the loan, the cost of the loan versus the cost or the savings of the price reduction? Um, and the thing I would highlight there is simply that um, the example and the discussion highlighted that sometimes debt is not a bad thing if debt can actually save you money in other ways. So it's the relative cost and benefits of how you use your money that you're really looking for. Okay, and the second example simply had to do with marginal costs of an expansion of programming against the marginal revenues. And in the example we had, it highlighted that the $3,000 per student that the state was willing to pay was probably lower, or no, higher than the marginal cost of $1,000 that it was going to cost HFA to actually teach each additional student. The thing I wanted to point out in that discussion forum was that the language of the exercise suggested that there was no step cost to adding the extra 10 students, and yet the chart that we were supposed to also use in that exercise suggested that when you hit 60 students, which HFA would have hit when it added 10 more students to the original 50 that it was serving, that there'd be a step cost of, I think it was $50,000. So I wasn't actually sure if the 10th student triggered that extra $50,000 cost or not. The main point here I'd like to just share is that when I used to do budgets, I used to sometimes, not always, but sometimes include a small portion of the eventual step cost in the per price cost or per unit cost earlier in the process. What do I mean by that? In other words, this occurred primarily in terms of span of supervision. In other words, if I knew I was going to be hiring 5 new direct line case managers, and that for every 5 direct line case managers I had to hire a supervisor, well, when I priced that for the state, I would include 1/5 of the supervisor's cost in each of the costs of the 5 supervisors that I'd be hiring. That way, when I got to the 6th new case manager I'd have to hire, I wouldn't have to hit the state with a huge extra bill covering the extra supervisor I'd have to hire. It was already sort of built into the price structure, and so the state wouldn't like go, oh no, we can't pay that extra money for the 6th person, because whether they knew it or not, they were already paying for it in the price of the first 5. And so you may want to think about those sorts of strategies when you know that there are going to be some stepwise costs along the way, and basically prepare your funder for that sort of stepwise cost. You can do it, as I just explained, by putting some of those costs in each of the incremental increases along the way, or you can have this discussion with your funder right up front and say, okay, you're going to have these 5 for this price, but when you go to the next, you need to realize it's going to be a bump up. That sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. You just have to judge the goals and the reasonableness of your funder. Because what the funder will sometimes do, and I'm kind of getting off my notes here, but what the funder will sometimes do is say, oh, let's see, I can get 10 more students from HFA at 3,000, but you're telling me that the 61st or 62nd student has this $50,000 extra cost? Well, I just won't fund with you. I'll go to another nonprofit and increase their contract by a marginal amount, 3,000, let's say, and thereby not give you the business, give it to someone else, and cut their costs that way. But again, you just have to figure out how. You have to be aware that there's this step cost coming, and have a useful strategy, an effective strategy for working with your funder so that you can keep growing as the stepwise cost is incurred without the funder getting cold feet and saying, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else instead. Okay? All right, and then just the other thing about the week, I put a last post in just now, is that don't be afraid to use the word profit as a nonprofit. It's sort of taboo that nonprofits don't want to talk about profit, but if you think of profit simply as excess cash that turn into savings right away, then profits don't have such a bad connotation. Profits in the for-profit world, get distributed to the investors and owners. Sometimes us ultra-liberal people think, oh, that's terrible. But profits in nonprofits cannot be distributed in such manner. They can only be saved in order to increase the liquidity and the financial position of the organization. And that's really what you want to do as a financial manager of nonprofits. Create that liquidity target, or meet that liquidity target, so that a reasonable amount of money is set aside, so that when the financial downturn occurs, and it will, it's not if, it will occur, you can weather the storm and keep the organization financially sustainable over time. And secondly, with that little cushion, you actually have money to independently pursue financial opportunities as they come along. In other words, if you want to start a new program, or you see a need to expand an existing program, well, if you have a financial cushion, you can actually do that without first getting permission from a funder who will give you the financial means to do that. No. If you have that cushion, then you can be an independent nonprofit organization and self-fund the operational expansion or new program to meet the need in the neighborhood that you, or in your sector area, that will help you maximize your mission. Okay? All right. I'll be reading the case studies no later than Wednesday, so I'll get them back to you then. Just week 6, it's a pretty light week, right? The one chapter you're supposed to read, Chapter 7 and Co., is relatively short. So I was thinking that I would add a very short case study. I'll just post it in the week 1 in the first discussion forum of the week so you can see it, and then maybe we can discuss it in discussion forum 2 this week along with your questions about any of the technical issues we've been discussing so far in the course. As I say, it's a short case study, but it's a really good example of what happens when an executive director is kind of clueless about cash management and clueless about the financial implications of program expansion, and how typically when you expand, you need more cash reserves and more liquidity in your organization. And in this particular case, the executive director is clueless, and because he is clueless, he basically brings financial ruin onto the organization. But we'll talk about that in the case study or in the discussion forum, and I hope it just drives home the point that you as an ED need to really be aware of how cash management and cash flows can impact the financial health of your organization. Okay? Thanks.